Dawn broke over Geneva as golden light spilled across the mountains and illuminated the towers of the Galactic Assembly's Earth Embassy. And across 400 light years of space, another dawn was breaking. Over the Velthari homeworld, the citizens of Velthos Prime woke to screaming alarms and emergency broadcasts that ordered them to look toward the Sky 200. Warships hung in orbit above their world, arranged in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of the Velthari sun. Every ship was intact and fully powered and broadcasting identification codes that confirmed them as vessels of the Velthari Dominion. Every ship was completely empty. The crew stood on the surface below, transported there by means that no Velthari scientist could explain, and they watched their own vessels float above them like monuments to a lesson they were still struggling to understand. Commander Vorath stood among his people and felt the weight of 10,000 stares as citizens pointed at him and demanded to know what had happened. He had no answers that would satisfy them. In the Galactic Assembly Hall, High Arbiter Thesok rose from his seat with fury, twisting his features into something barely recognizable. "This is an act of war," he shouted, his voice echoing through the massive chamber. "The humans have attacked Velthari ships and violated Velthari sovereignty and threatened the security of the entire Concordat." Ambassador Yoon Sehan stood calmly at the central podium, her hands folded in front of her, her expression neutral. "No Velthari was harmed," she replied. "No Velthari ship was damaged, and no Velthari territory was invaded. You kidnapped our fleet," Thesok screamed. "We relocated your fleet," Yoon corrected. "After that fleet entered human space uninvited and positioned itself in a threatening formation above our homeworld." Murmurs rippled through the assembly as representatives reconsidered what they thought they knew about the situation. The Velthari vessels entered Sol System as a navigation exercise, Thesok insisted. 200 warships do not conduct navigation exercises in the home system of another species. Yoon replied. "That was intimidation, and we responded accordingly," she gestured. And holographic displays activated throughout the chamber, showing the Velthari fleet as it now appeared above Velthos Prime. "Every ship is intact," she said. "Every crew member is safe on the surface below. And we accomplished this without a single casualty on either side." The Kreth representative rose, his mandibles clicking in a pattern that the translator rendered as thoughtful rather than mocking. "The humans moved 200 warships across 400 light years instantaneously," he said. "How is this possible?" "That is a question for our scientists to discuss with yours," Yoon replied. "If the Concordat chooses to engage with humanity as partners rather than subjects, you cannot share this technology," Thesok declared. "No species gives away such power." "We are not giving anything away," Yoon agreed. "But we are offering cooperation to those who treat us with respect." She turned to address the full assembly, her voice carrying to every corner of the Great Hall. "Humanity does not want war," she said. "We have had enough war to last us 1,000 generations. And we came to the stars seeking something better. Yet you attacked us." Thesok interrupted. "We defended ourselves," Yoon corrected. "There is a difference. And it is a difference that your species has apparently forgotten." She let the silence stretch for a moment before continuing. "The Velthari have not faced a true challenge in 3,000 years," she said. "You have grown comfortable in your superiority, and you have forgotten what it means to face an enemy who does not fear you." "We are not afraid of humans," Thesok declared. "Perhaps you should be," Yoon replied quietly. "Not because we wish you harm, but because your inability to feel appropriate caution nearly led to a conflict that would have cost both our peoples dearly." She held up her hand, and a new display appeared showing the locations where the human fleet had actually been positioned during the confrontation. The assembly fell silent as they realized how thoroughly they had been deceived. We could have placed those ships anywhere, Yoon said. Inside Valkyrie cities, inside this very chamber, inside the heart of a star. But we chose to demonstrate restraint because we want allies, not subjects, partners, not victims. She presented the petition for Concordat membership once again. I asked the Assembly to reconsider humanity's request for full membership, she said. Not because we have demonstrated power, but because we have demonstrated responsibility in the use of that power. The voting proceeded in silence. And when the results were announced, the chamber erupted in sounds of surprise and uncertainty. Humanity had been granted provisional membership, pending further discussions about technology sharing and military cooperation. As Yoon departed the chamber, she passed High Arbiter Desok standing alone near the exit. What makes humans so different? He asked. His voice stripped of its earlier arrogance. Yoon considered the question for a moment. Humanity spent thousands of years fighting each other, she replied. We learned every trick, every strategy, every deception. And when we finally united, we did not forget those lessons. We simply found new applications. She began to walk away, then paused and looked back. The galaxy looked at our history and saw weakness, she said. They should have seen practice back on Earth. Defense Minister Park Jin-ho watched the sun rise over the Pacific Ocean and allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Captain Choi Min-ha's face appeared on his screen as she reported from the silent cradle. All assets have returned to hidden positions, she announced. No human casualties, no Valkyrie casualties. And the fleet has vanished without a trace, just as planned. Well done, Captain. Park replied. He was silent for a moment, then asked the question that had been on his mind since the operation began. How long before the galaxy realizes we were bluffing? He said. How long before they understand that we cannot actually do most of what we demonstrated? Choi smiled, and there was something ancient and knowing in her expression. Long enough, sir, she replied. Long enough for them to decide that they never want to find out. Park nodded and returned his gaze to the rising sun. Humanity had gambled everything on the greatest psychological operation in history, and they had won. But somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered what would happen when the galaxy finally called their bluff. There was a problem for another day for now. The dawn was beautiful, and Earth was safe, and that was enough. Commander Vorath refused to sleep as midnight approached on the distant Earth, and he stood on his bridge watching sensors that showed nothing while his remaining crews grew more terrified with each passing hour. Maintain formation, he ordered for perhaps the 100th time. They want us afraid, and fear is a weapon we will not give them. His officers obeyed, but he could see the doubt in their eyes and hear the tremor in their voices. Valkyrie had built their empire on military supremacy, and the knowledge that some enemy existed who could pluck their ships from space like fruit from a tree had shaken them to their core. At precisely midnight Earth time, every light on every Valkyrie ship went dark simultaneously. Vorath felt the deck shift beneath his feet as artificial gravity failed, and he grabbed his command console as he began to float upward in the sudden weightlessness. Emergency power, he shouted into the darkness. Nothing happened. No emergency lights activated. No backup systems engaged. No power of any kind flowed through the ship. This is impossible, someone said from the darkness. Ships do not simply lose all power at once. The humans have done something to us, another voice added. Some weapon we have never seen. Vorath pulled himself along the console toward where he knew the manual control should be, and his hands found cold metal that refused to respond to any input. Then he heard the sound, soft hiss of atmosphere that told him an airlock had opened somewhere on his ship, followed by the whisper of movement in the corridors beyond the bridge. They are boarding us, he realized aloud. How? His second officer demanded. We would have seen them approach on sensors. We saw nothing because they wanted us to see nothing. Vorath replied. The bridge door slid open manually, pushed by hands that Vorath could not see, and figures began to enter the space. They moved in complete silence, their forms barely visible in the faint light that filtered through the viewports from distant stars. And they wore armor that seemed to bend the darkness around them. Vorath watched as his officers were restrained one by one, and he noticed that the humans did not fight or struggle or threaten. They simply appeared beside each Valkyrie, secured their wrists with some kind of binding, and moved on to the next target. When a human finally approached Vorath, he reached for the sidearm at his hip and found nothing there. He looked down in confusion, his hand closing on empty space where his weapon should have been, and he realized that someone had already disarmed him. "I did not see you take it," he said. "You were not meant to," the human replied. And Vorath recognized the voice as female. She stepped closer, and enough starlight fell across her face for him to see her features. "Captain Choi Minha," she introduced herself, "commanding officer of the carrier Silent Cradle. And I have been looking forward to meeting you." "Commander, how did you do this?" Vorath demanded. "How did you board my ship without being detected? How did you disable our power? How did you make our ships disappear?" "Those are excellent questions," Choi replied, "and I will answer them because I want you to understand what happened here." She gestured to one of her soldiers, who produced a small device that cast a soft blue glow across the bridge. "Humanity spent 50 years as observers in the Galactic Concordat," Choi explained. 50 years watching and learning, and adapting to technologies that your species has used for millennia without truly understanding. "We understand our technology perfectly," Vorath insisted. "You understand how to use it," Choi corrected, "but you never asked what else it could do, because you never had enemies who forced you to innovate." She moved to stand beside the main viewport, her silhouette framed against the stars. "Human ships do not fight other ships," she said. "We learned early in our space exploration that direct combat is inefficient and wasteful." "Then what do your ships do?" "We fight space itself," Choi replied. "We manipulate gravity on scales that your scientists consider impossible. We redirect light to hide our presence. And we create zones where the normal rules of physics become suggestions rather than laws." Vorath felt the last of his certainty crumble away. "That is not possible," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Every ship we have taken from your fleet is intact and undamaged," Choi continued. "Every crew member is alive and safe. And we did this not to demonstrate cruelty, but to demonstrate precision." "Why?" "Because High Arbiter Thesok needed to understand something that his arrogance prevented him from seeing," Choi answered. "Humanity does not want war. We do not want conquest. We want only to be treated with the respect that all sentient beings deserve. You kidnapped our ships and crews to demand respect," Vorath said with what dignity he could muster. "We demonstrated capability to earn respect," Choi corrected. "There is a difference." She approached him and met his eyes with a steady gaze. "Your crew will be returned home safely," she said. "But first, you will watch what happens next. Because this is the part that matters." "What happens next?" Vorath asked. "By dawn, your ships will be gone," Choi replied. "Not destroyed. Simply relocated to a place where the entire galaxy can see exactly what humanity is capable of." She smiled, and there was no malice in her expression. "We want the Concordat to understand that humanity could have done this differently," she said. "We could have filled your ships with fire instead of soldiers. We could have left debris instead of intact vessels. We could have sent home corpses instead of living crews, but you chose not to. We chose to teach instead of punish," Choi confirmed. "Whether that lesson is learned depends on beings like you and Thesok and the Galactic Assembly." She turned to her soldiers and issued quiet orders. And the process of securing the Valkyrie flagship continued in perfect silence. Everett floated in the darkness of his own bridge, surrounded by enemies who had defeated him without firing a single shot. And he began to understand that everything he had believed about humanity was wrong. Panic spread through the Velthari fleet like a disease, passing from ship to ship, through frantic communications that grew more desperate. With each passing hour, Commander Vorath stood at the center of his bridge and watched his officers struggle to make sense of readings that defied everything they knew about physics and warfare. Our communications to Velthari space are still blocked. The communications officer reported. I cannot determine what is causing the interference, but nothing we transmit is leaving this system. Then we leave this system ourselves, Vorath declared. Order all ships to form up for conventional travel to the nearest jump point, and we will find our way home the slow way if we must. The fleet began to move. 200 warships arranging themselves into a defensive formation that had served the Velthari well for millennia, and they started the long journey toward what they hoped would be escape for the first 18 hours. Nothing happened. The tension on every bridge slowly began to ease as officers convinced themselves that the earlier anomalies had been some kind of natural phenomenon or perhaps a malfunction in their own systems. Then the side of justice stopped responding. Commander, we have lost contact with the side, the communications officer announced. Their last transmission was a routine status report. And then nothing. Engine failure, Vorath suggested. Navigation error. They may have simply fallen behind, sir. Other ships report they can see the side's position, but there is nothing there. Vorath felt the cold sensation return with new intensity. What do you mean nothing there? The ship is gone. Commander, no debris, no escape pods, no energy signatures. The side of justice has simply vanished. Before Vorath could respond, another report came in. The wrath of ancestors has also gone silent, and visual confirmation shows empty space where it should be. That is 2 ships, Vorath said. 2 ships with over 3,000 crew members do not simply disappear. 3 ships now. Commander, we have lost contact with the Pride of Velthos over the next 12 hours. The disappearances continued with terrible regularity. Ships vanished without warning or explanation, leaving no trace that they had ever existed. And the survivors began to see things that pushed them toward madness. Commander, the crew of the Dominion's Blade is reporting shadow movements at the edge of their sensor range, an officer announced. They describe shapes that appear and vanish before they can be identified. The Herald of Conquest reports hearing voices on their internal communications. Another added, whispers in human languages that their translators cannot process. Vorath grabbed the edge of his command console to steady himself. This is psychological warfare, he declared. The humans are trying to frighten us into surrender, and we will not give them the satisfaction. Sir, the Scourge of Inferiors is requesting immediate assistance. What is their situation? Complete systems failure. They are running on emergency power only, and their captain reports that he can see human figures standing in his corridors. Vorath opened a direct channel to the Scourge and saw Captain Nassar's face appear on screen, illuminated by the red glow of emergency lighting. Besser, report your status, Vorath commanded. They are everywhere, Desser replied, his voice shaking in a way that Vorath had never heard from any Velthari officer. They appear from nowhere and stand in the darkness watching us. And when we approach them, they vanish like smoke. There is no one aboard your ship except your crew, Vorath insisted. Then explain what I am seeing with my own eyes, Desser demanded. The video feed flickered, and for just a moment Vorath thought he saw shapes standing behind Desser. Shapes that wore dark armor and had faces hidden behind reflective visors. Then the feed went dead. Scourge of Inferiors is no longer responding, the communications officer announced quietly. Send the rescue team. Vorath ordered 3 ships broke formation and raced toward the Scourge's last known position. Their crews armed and ready for whatever they might find. They found nothing. Scourge of inferiors had vanished like all the others, leaving empty space and unanswered questions, but something had been left behind. One of the rescue ships reported finding a message written on their own viewport from the inside. Written in perfect Velthari script, it appeared as they watched the message read, "You came to mock. We came to teach." Vorath stared at the image of those words for a long time. And when he finally spoke, his voice had lost all of its earlier confidence. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked. 112. Commander. He closed his eyes and tried to think of what to do next. But before he could form a plan, his screen activated with an incoming transmission. Ambassador Yunsihan's face appeared. And she was smiling. "Commander Vorath," she said pleasantly. "I hope you are finding our system educational. What have you done with my ships?" Vorath demanded. "They are safe," Yun replied. "Every member of every crew is alive and unharmed, which is more than could be said if this situation were reversed. This is an act of war." "No. Commander, war is what you came here expecting. What you are experiencing is something else entirely." She leaned closer to the screen, and her smile faded. 112 of your ships remain," she said. "By dawn on Earth, there will be none, and you may surrender at any time if you wish to avoid further confusion." "Velthari do not surrender," Vorath declared. "I know," Yun replied. "That is what makes this such an effective demonstration." The screen went dark, and Vorath stood alone on his bridge, surrounded by officers who looked at him with fear in their eyes. "All ships form defensive sphere," he ordered, his voice steady despite the terror growing in his heart. "Maximum power to shields and weapons. And if the humans want to fight, they will face Velthari fire." His remaining fleet obeyed, pulling together into a tight formation, bristling with weapons and protected by overlapping shield generators. They waited for the attack. It did not come. Hours passed in silence, and the Velthari crews watched their sensors and saw nothing but empty space. But deep in his soul, Vorath knew that the humans were out there, watching, waiting, and when they finally moved, nothing he could do would stop them. 6 hours passed without a single transmission from Earth, and Commander Vorath found himself pacing the bridge of his flagship with growing unease that he refused to acknowledge. Still nothing. He demanded for the 4th time. "Nothing." "Commander," the communications officer replied. "No diplomatic protests, no military challenges. No civilian broadcasts mentioning our presence at all." Vorath stopped pacing and stared at the blue-green world that hung in the darkness beyond his viewport. "They should be terrified," he muttered. "They should be flooding every channel with demands and pleas and offers of tribute. Perhaps they are simply too primitive to understand the threat we represent," his second officer suggested. "No," Vorath replied slowly. "They understood the Sock's words perfectly well, and they know exactly what 200 warships positioned above their world means." He returned to his command chair and drummed his clawed fingers against the armrest. "Send scout vessels closer to Earth," he ordered. "I want to see what the humans are doing." 3 small Velthari ships broke formation and accelerated toward the inner system, their sensors working to penetrate the strange silence that had fallen over human space. 2 hours later, they reported back with information that only deepened the mystery. "Commander, civilian traffic appears to be continuing normally," the lead scout reported. "Ground transportation is operating on schedule. Commercial flights are moving between cities, and we can detect no signs of military mobilization or civilian evacuation." "That makes no sense," Vorath growled. "There is more." "Commander, the humans appear to be going about their daily lives as if we do not exist. And in some regions, the surface lights have actually dimmed as if they have reduced power consumption for the night cycle." They are ignoring us, the second officer said with disbelief in his voice. Earth felt a cold sensation that he had not experienced in nearly a century of military service. And he recognized it after a moment as the beginning of fear, crushed the feeling immediately, and stood from his chair. They are not ignoring us, he declared. They are planning something, and we will not fall into whatever primitive trap they think they can set. What are your orders? Commander, maintain position and increase sensor sweeps to maximum range. And I want continuous monitoring of every human ship in this system. The sensor officer worked his console, then looked up with an expression that Varath did not like at all. Commander, regarding the human ships, what about them? They appear to be gone. Varath crossed the bridge in 3 strides and seized the sensor officer by the shoulder. Explain, he demanded. When we arrived, we detected 312 human military vessels throughout the system. But current scans show only sensor ghosts and power signatures that do not match any known ship configurations. You are telling me their entire fleet has vanished. I am telling you that what we thought was their fleet may never have been their fleet at all, the officer replied. These readings suggest we have been tracking decoys since we entered the system. Varath released him and stepped back, his mind racing through possibilities that grew darker with each passing second. That is impossible, he said. Velthari sensors are the finest in the galaxy, and primitive human technology could not fool them. Commander, another officer interrupted. I am detecting anomalies in the outer system. What kind of anomalies? Our monitoring probes near the jump points have stopped transmitting. Varath turned to face the main display, which now showed the positions of every Velthari asset in the solar system. Which probes? He asked. All of them, Commander. Every probe we deployed in the outer system went offline. Simultaneously, approximately 4 minutes ago, the cold feeling returned. Stronger this time, and Varath found it much harder to suppress navigation. He called out, plot a course to the nearest jump point, and calculate how long it would take us to reach Velthari space at maximum speed. The navigation officer worked frantically at his console, then looked up with something approaching panic in his eyes. Commander, I cannot plot a safe route. Why not? Because the jump points have moved. Silence fell across the bridge as every officer turned to stare at the navigation station. Jump points do not move. Varath said flatly, I know, Commander, but the coordinates we logged when we entered this system no longer match the gravitational signatures we are detecting now. And I cannot explain how that is possible. Deep beneath Earth's surface, Defense Minister Park Jin-ho watched the Velthari fleet's sensor data mirror onto his own displays and allowed himself a small smile. Phase 1 is complete. Admiral Chun reported from her position aboard the carrier's silent cradle. The Velthari are blind and trapped. How long before they attempt to leave by conventional travel? Park asked, based on their current position. They will need approximately 4 days to reach the false jump point coordinates we have fed their systems. 4 days. Park repeated. More than enough time, sir. The Shadow Fleet reports all units are in position and awaiting orders. Park looked at the holographic representation of Sol System, which showed far more than 300 human vessels. And he thought about all the years of preparation that had led to this moment. The Velthari believe they know us. He said quietly, they watched our history of warfare and saw only savagery and weakness. What did they miss? Sir, his aide asked. They missed the lesson that history teaches, Park replied. Humanity does not fight wars to demonstrate strength. We fight wars to survive. And we have become very good at surviving. He turned to face his command staff. Begin Phase 2, he ordered. And remind all units that we want 0 casualties on both sides. Because the goal is not to destroy the Velthari. The goal is to teach them something they will never forget. In the darkness between worlds, human ships began to move, and the hunt commenced. The Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly stretched for nearly a kilometer in every direction, and representatives from 12 dominant species filled the curved seating that rose toward a ceiling made of living crystal that shifted colors with the mood of the chamber ambassador. Yoon Se-han stood at the central podium, her black formal uniform crisp against the swirling colors that surrounded her, and she waited with the patience that had defined her 30-year diplomatic career. The human delegation requests full membership in the Galactic Concordat, she announced, her voice carrying through translation devices to every ear and audio receptor, and the massive space laughter erupted from the Velthury section before she finished speaking. High Arbiter Desok rose from his elevated seat, his forearms spreading wide in a gesture of theatrical disbelief, and his gray-scaled face twisted into what humans had learned to recognize as contempt mixed with amusement. Full membership, he repeated, letting the words hang in the air as more laughter rippled through the chamber. The humans request full membership. He gestured to his attendants, and holographic displays burst to life throughout the hall, showing images that made Yoon's jaw tighten, even though she had expected this exact tactic. After war filled the displays. Human conflict spanning thousands of years, and the violence played out in graphic detail as representatives from other species watched with expressions ranging from disgust to morbid fascination. They call this species civilized, Desok announced. They have not gone a single generation without slaughtering each other in massive numbers, and they dare to request standing among the great powers of the galaxy. The Kreth delegation clicked their mandibles in rapid patterns that the translator rendered as harsh laughter, and the gaseous illumin pulsed with colors that indicated deep amusement at the display. Your species is barely 300 years old in space, Desok continued. The Velthury have sailed between stars for 12,000 years, and we remember when your ancestors were painting on cave walls and dying from simple infections. More images appeared, showing famines and plagues and environmental disasters that had scarred Earth throughout human history. You fight among yourselves like animals, the High Arbiter declared. You poison your own world and call it progress, and you expect us to welcome you as equals. Yoon remained still at the podium, her expression calm, her hands folded in front of her. Your fleet numbers 340 vessels, Desok said, bringing up the final display that showed the known disposition of human military forces. The Velthury Dominion commands 12,000 warships, each one superior to anything your primitive shipyards can produce. He spread all four arms wide and turned to address the full assembly. Earth is irrelevant, he declared. Humanity is a footnote in galactic history, a brief curiosity that will burn itself out within a few more centuries, while the true powers continue as we always have. The laughter that followed was the loudest yet, and Yoon waited until it died down before she spoke. You measure strength in numbers, she said quietly, her voice somehow cutting through the lingering noise. We measure it differently. Desok's eyes narrowed, but he dismissed her words with a wave of one hand. The petition is denied, he announced. Humanity may continue as an observer species for another 50 years, at which point they may petition again, assuming they have not destroyed themselves by then. The session ended, and Yoon gathered her small delegation and departed without another word that night, aboard the diplomatic transport returning to Earth. She received the communication she had been expecting. 200 Velthury warships have entered Sol System, her aide reported. They claim it is a navigation exercise. Yoon nodded slowly and looked out the viewport at the stars streaking past. They want us afraid, she said. They want us to protest and beg and remind the galaxy of our weakness. What do we do? The aide asked. Exactly what we planned, Yoon replied. Notify Defense Minister Park and tell him to begin protocol silence. 8 hours later, the Velthury battle group took up position near Mars. their massive warships arranged in a formation designed to intimidate. And Commander Vorath stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched Earth turn slowly in the distance, broadcast on all open channels. He ordered, "Let the humans see what real power looks like." His communications officer obeyed, and soon every screen on Earth that could receive the signal displayed the Velthari fleet in all its terrible glory. "Scan their defenses," Vorath commanded. "I want to know exactly what pathetic forces they have positioned to protect their world." The sensor officer worked his console for several minutes, then looked up with confusion on his scaled face. "Commander, the human orbital platforms have gone dark." "Dark," Vorath repeated. "No power signatures, no active systems, nothing. And their fleet appears to have powered down as well." Vorath moved to the sensor station and examined the readings himself. And what he saw made him laugh out loud. "They are so frightened that they have shut down their own defenses," he announced to his bridge crew. "The mighty humans have responded to our presence by hiding under their beds." Laughter filled the bridge, and Vorath returned to his command chair with a satisfied expression. "Send word to High Arbiter of Desok," he ordered. "Tell him the humans are even more pathetic than we believed, and their response to our show of force was to surrender before we even threatened them." The message went out, and the Velthari battle group settled into position for what they expected to be several days of leisurely intimidation deep beneath the surface of Earth, in a bunker that did not appear on any official records. Defense Minister Park Jin-ho watched the same sensor data from a very different perspective. "All units report ready," his aide announced. "Protocol silence is in effect across the entire system." Park nodded and turned to the holographic display that showed the true disposition of human forces, a display that would have made Commander Vorath considerably less amused. "The Velthari believe we have 340 ships," Park said quietly. "Let them continue to believe that." "Sir, Admiral Chun reports the Shadow Fleet is in position." "Good," Park replied. "Now we wait, and we let them grow comfortable. And when they finally realize what is happening, it will already be too late." He looked at the image of the Velthari fleet. 200 warships crewed by beings who had laughed at humanity that very morning. "They came here to mock us," he said. "They will leave here with a very different understanding of what humanity represents, in orbit above Mars." Commander Vorath settled in for what he expected to be an uneventful night, completely unaware that the darkness around his fleet had begun to move the silence from Earth continued. And the Velthari took it as confirmation of human weakness. They could not have been more wrong.